I just wanted some clarification on tithing.
Being unable to forgive somebody who causes an offense
Does it really matter whether someone is Protestant or Catholic?
The genealogies are different from Matthew to Luke.
I was wondering what the Bible said in terms of what I should do.
This is Pastor's Perspective. We're here every Monday through Friday providing answers on a variety of topics, including the Bible, end times, other religions, and the family. Call right now with your question at 1-888-564-6173. That's 888-564-6173. You can also post your question at facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
Well, hello. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Pastor's Perspective program. We are ready to answer some Bible questions here on the program. We're here till 4 p.m. Pacific time, so that means you've got an hour to give us a call at 888-564-6173. That's 888-564-6173. And we'll also do some Facebook and or Facebook Messenger questions if we get a chance. But the phone number, 888-564-6173. Phone is definitely the best way to get your question answered. Joining us here in studio, Pastor Brian Broderson from Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California, and author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube, joining us via the Bobby Cam. How you guys doing?
Well,
great.
I'm doing great. Bobby looks like he's doing great. So, yeah.
Bobby's wearing a baseball cap today. What does it say on that? Is that an Image Church baseball cap?
That's a Quicksilver
no,
that's missing the Q.
Quicksilver.
But it's missing the
That's
Q?
That's exactly right. You're missing the Q.
So is this a knockoff hat, Bobby?
It's missing the Q. It's missing the S for cents. And it's missing the 1 in 1969.
So it's just a really old hat.
You know what's crazy? Lance is gonna be angry at me for wearing a hat. You guys will have to tell him that I repent in sackcloth and ashes. I was out and about and came rolling in a little bit late, and didn't have time to brush my hair for the Facebook group.
Hey man, don't be condemned. I wore a hat to church prayer meeting last night because I had the same issue. I had a hair issue. So.
That's right, the hair issue.
Yes, and then it's been so windy here in Southern California that
yesterday
hair just kind of goes everywhere.
Yesterday was crazy. I have a friend out from the Chicago area, and he was like, "What the heck's going on here?" You know, it's like I came from the Windy City, and this is more windy than the Windy City. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Is it snowing out there, guys?
The mountains it is.
Yeah. Lots of snow in the mountains. Yeah, it's really pretty. It's really, I mean, for us, it's cold. I just saw somebody posted a weather from Siberia. It was 56 below. So we're not that cold, but... It
was 56 this morning.
Yeah, we're about 100 degrees
56
warmer.
below. Big difference. Big difference. Wow.
But this morning it was
amazing.
It was 30. It was 39 when I got to the church this morning about 6:30, and then I think the further out you go toward the high desert, I'm sure it was even probably maybe down to the freezing.
Yeah.
Temperature. So
Yep. But it's been really cold here in Southern California. Our poor people here have had to wear 2 tank tops lately. It's just been crazy cold. I mean, I don't know how we...
They're doubling up on their board shorts and their tank tops. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. 888-564-6173 is our telephone number. And let's begin with a couple of those Facebook questions. Here is one from actually 3 questions from Michelle in Huntington Beach. First of all, Michelle says, I was reading Genesis 1, and after God separated the darkness and the light, then God said, let there be firmament in the midst of the waters. It goes on to separate the waters from under and above. It never mentions that he made the waters. Was water the only thing he didn't make? Was it already there? Also, in verse 24, it says, God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind. Could that be viewed as part of the evolution theory, letting the earth bring forth the creature? And then from Genesis 20, it says how the Lord had closed the wombs of the women in Abimelech's home because of Sarah. Why does it seem like Sarah's being blamed for the whole deception when the story points to this being Abraham's doing? Brian, which ones do you want?
Those are some pretty good questions. The first one is simple. The first verse answers it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then it goes on to say, and the earth was without form and void. So everything was created, and then it was in a chaotic state, which was part of the process. So God's now going to begin to, piece everything together, so to speak. So the water's there when he creates everything, but now he's going to start, separating the waters, like she said, from above, the waters below, and so forth. So no, God created water when he created the universe.
Okay.
The second question was, what was that?
About letting the earth bring forth the living creature. Is that
That's a
could
good
that be viewed as evolution theory?
No, I don't think so, Bobby.
A theistic evolutionist would utilize that, but to your point, no. If you're not a theistic evolutionist, you're not going to take that. So that is a proof text that somebody that looks at Genesis and sees theistic evolution as their worldview, they would see, look, God created the universe, and he created it with the properties of evolution to take place so that it could bring forth, so to speak. And so that bring forth language could be a text that a theistic evolutionist would use.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm just not as comfortable with that. Certainly comfortable with microevolution, but macroevolution and this idea that we've really evolved from the apes, and then all of a sudden, God kind of stamped the Imago Dei on an original pair, but before that, you still had like human-like people. They just didn't have the Imago Dei. I'm not comfortable with that aspect.
Yeah, and as you go further into Genesis, it explains when it says, "Let the earth bring forth." It explains that out of the dust of the earth, God made. So God made out of the dust all of the land creatures, and of course, finally, He makes man out of the dust of the earth. So it's not like the earth is by itself bringing forth this life. God is using the dirt. I mean, man, He creates man from dirt. From dust you came, to dust you shall return. So literally from the ground, God creates. And then the Abraham and Sarah, it says because of Sarah, not blaming Sarah, God is giving the reason why He shut up the wombs of the Philistine wives.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not like, well, it was Sarah's fault that God did this, but no, it was because of Abimelech's possibly taking Sarah into his harem. God He's intervening to prevent that from happening.
Right.
And so He's showing that there's a judgment that's happening on them.
Now, when you do read the verse 18 in chapter 20, it does. I can see why Michelle would think that it is saying, "Oh, this is all Sarah's fault" because of the wording and different. I'm looking at the NIV. For the Lord had closed up every womb in Abimelech's household because of Abraham's wife Sarah.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's not blaming her.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but you have to read back a little bit, because Abimelech was thinking to take her as his wife. But of course, he was thinking he could do that because he doesn't think she's Abraham's wife, because Abraham had said that she's my sister. So, yeah.
All right, Michelle, thank you for your questions. Bobby, you want to chime in on that too? Go ahead.
Well, maybe just one way of looking at it: for the Lord had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech on account of Sarah, Abraham's wife.
Yeah.
So kind of as a result of that storyline that was taking place. So it's not putting the fault at Sarah. It's the wombs are being closed up on account of Sarah. That's just an interesting concept as well when you just consider like the wombs being closed up. It seems like this would have been a short term ordeal that was transpiring. And it just is meant to show, what God's blessings are going to be on Abraham and his people, and his lack of blessing or curse is going to be on those who are against things and of that nature. How could you scientifically prove that the wombs are really closed up? You can't. You're trusting that God providentially opens and closes the womb. But you can see the handiwork of God through these stories, like disrupting Abimelech and making him aware, right? And kind of God's intervention through a dream. And so I love how God can work to make people aware that he is ultimately sovereign and providentially working out all the details to bring his plan to fruition.
All right, 888-564-6173 is our telephone number, 888-564-6173. Maybe we'll get to more Facebook questions later, but right now we're going to go to the phones. Starting in Las Vegas, here is Alicia. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Alicia. You want to know about modern-day prophets.
Yes, please. There's a friend of mine that I know, and he has a friend who's been telling him and showing him videos of these prophets that are out there claiming. They're basically saying that the president that just finished is actually going to continue being the president, and I'm just a little confused because even now, as we have a new president, this guy is still saying that the prophets are saying that he's still going to come back and this and that, and so I'm just wondering, what are are there still prophets, and how do we know for sure?
Yeah, are these modern-day prophets or just conspiracy theorists? Brian, what do you say?
They are the latter rather than the former. No, they are not modern-day prophets. And, I think is it Deuteronomy 13 where God kind of lays out the way that you can determine whether a person is a prophet or not. And the way you...
Deuteronomy 18.
Is it 18? The way you know that they're not a prophet is that they prophesy things that don't come true. So this is a group of people, and there's more than one of them who have prophesied this very thing and more things about, President Trump, that he was going to continue on, that he was going to be inaugurated, and so on and so forth. But, that is not happening. So I think these guys at some point ought to admit that they're not really prophets, that they're speaking out of their own heart's desires. And this was a thing with back in the Old Testament period, you found probably one of the greatest illustrations of this is found in the book of Kings, where you have a prophet named Micaiah, and you have another prophet named Zedekiah. And Micaiah is the true prophet. So he says to the king, Ahab, he says, basically, you're going to go to battle and you're going to die in the battle. And this other prophet stands up and says, well, they had already said, no, that's not. You're going to prosper. You're going to win. It's going to be great. And when Micaiah says, no, actually going to die in battle, this guy Zedekiah comes over and he smacks him and he says, where did the Spirit of the Lord go from me to you? And he's basically calling him Micaiah, a false prophet. And Micaiah says, well, okay, let's see. We'll see what happens, and I'll tell you what's going to happen. Not only is the king going to die in battle, but you're going to die before the end of the year. And that's exactly what ended up happening. So the person who had the true prophecy, it was the prophecy that came to pass. So obviously, people are not held accountable like they were at that time, or we'd have a bunch of dead guys around. But, by God's mercy, he's not doing that. But hopefully one day they're going to, Bobby, it's funny because, like Harold Camping, for example, back when he was alive, he had all these predictions about, when Christ was going to return and so forth. And he always got them wrong, but instead of saying I got it wrong, he just said, well, let's just move the date. We'll keep moving the date.
That's right.
And then finally he died. So what can you do? But
Jeez.
Does that help, Alicia?
Hold on. Let me bring Alicia back up. Does it help?
That helps. So would you say that there's just God doesn't really speak to people like that anymore? I mean, I know people can have dreams and things like that, but would you say that just like prophecy, like doesn't happen?
Well, I wouldn't say that because I do think, the Bible speaks of prophetic gifts. And even in the New Testament, beyond the Gospels, we have like a man named Agabus who predicts that there's going to be a famine over the land in the days of Claudius Caesar, which did happen. He predicts that Paul's going to go to Jerusalem and he's going to be arrested, which did happen. But, as a general rule, and especially when it gets into prophesying like world events, like, this would be a world event, right, for Trump to continue on as the president. When I lived in London years ago, there were a number of people in the country at the time who were prophesying that there was going to be, in 1996, the greatest revival to ever hit the UK was going to hit. And they had all of these things that they predicted would be happening. One of them was that, the Queen would become an evangelist and she would open up Buckingham Palace and people would flow in for Bible studies and all of the cab drivers in the city would be converted and Parliament would all get on their knees and accept Christ. And, and these were well-known leaders in the country, charismatic leaders who were making these predictions.
Wow.
And I did move to England in 1996. Maybe they just had mistaken things a little bit, but so this is nothing new. That's the point that I'm making. And but you don't want to just throw out everything and say, oh, there's no prophecy today. You just have to, as the Bible tells us, Paul says it in 1 Corinthians 14. He says, when people are prophesying, test them. Test the prophets and see whether it's true. And, of course, one of the major tests is, okay, let's watch and see. Mm-hmm. So we've watched and we've seen that. I mean, some of them were saying that, Trump would be inaugurated, not Biden. Well, first of all, it started with they're going to prove that the election was stolen. And so once they get all the votes, sorted out, then, that will be how we'll know that Trump won. And then that didn't work. So, okay, well, Biden's not going to be inaugurated. Trump is going to be inaugurated on, inauguration date, January 20th. Well, that's come and gone, and that didn't happen. So I think, you got two strikes. You might as well just admit that it's over.
Yeah. Alicia, thanks for calling us today on Pastor's Perspective and for listening on the radio there in Las Vegas.
Yes.
Alicia, what's the weather like in Las Vegas?
Well, I live up north and it snowed a lot. So, but now I'm down here in town and it's cold, but it's not freezing.
Okay. Because my wife is heading to Las Vegas tomorrow, so I'll give her a firsthand.
Oh, yeah, dress warm. It's going to be cold and a little rainy all week. So.
Okay. All right.
Much like here, I think.
Yeah,
Cold and rainy.
I think it's similar.
Yep.
I was in Vegas a few years back with a friend. We had some friends that lived there. And it was downright freezing during the day. It was windy and just, I was walking around like just feeling like I was in Russia or something.
Wow.
And then I went through Vegas in August, and I felt like I was in hell.
All right. Thanks for your phone call from Las Vegas today on Pastor's Perspective. And Cheryl, if you're listening, remember you can listen to K-Wave on 98.1 there in Las Vegas. All right. Next is Lydia. Welcome to the program, Lydia. You've got a problem with family members making fun of your Christian faith. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. How are you, pastors?
We're good. Thanks, Lydia.
Good.
Well, yeah, to be brief, I'm in an interfaith marriage. My husband is Jewish, and my family and myself were Christian. But we've embraced each other's, traditions and faith. That's the blessing that we have in this marriage. The challenge that I'm having is with my brother-in-law. And my husband has come to, he attends church with us. We go to Saddleback Church, and he loves Pastor Rick Warren's messages. It's really done a lot for his walk in his faith. But the challenge we're having is because his family has always been Jewish, maybe it's intimidation or envy or something, but it's to a point where, 12 years into this, we're still in the we're still being made fun of, if that makes sense. So I'm asking, how should I handle this? I turned it over to my husband to talk to his brother. Then I've turned it over to my husband to talk to his parents to talk to the brother. And we're getting nowhere. I've turned the cheek for 12 years, and now I'm at the point where I'm going to confront him myself, but I want to do so in a bibliocentric fashion. I'm asking for prayer, and then I'm asking your take on how I should approach this.
All right, Bobby, we'll start with you. What do you tell Lydia to say to her family?
I guess, Lydia, my first question would be, is the individual who's giving you a hard time, what is his belief? So you're married to a person who's a Jewish person that goes to church with you at Saddleback, and it sounds like you have a brother that's kind of ridiculing you, if I understood you correctly. What is his belief?
Yes, my brother-in-law. Well, this is my husband's brother. They grew up Jewish. They were bar mitzvahed. But I don't want to judge his faith or judge his walk, but I wouldn't say he's really a participating person of Jewish faith. He'll go to temple on Day of Atonement and Pesach, Passover, and then that's the extent of it.
So is he an atheist?
No, I wouldn't say atheist, but again, if you're asking me, I would observe that he is a lukewarm person of Jewish faith.
I'm just
the
wondering,
reason I asked those...
Bobby, let me ask this before you jump in. I'm wondering, like, when you say ridicule, what in what way? Is this sort of like little digs here and there, little sarcastic comments, or is he coming out with a full spiel about why you shouldn't be a Christian?
Okay, well, two things. First, it became more of a brother rivalry where it's just, he's taunting his younger brother and giving him a hard time. Well, then it's becoming more offensive where it's being more directed at the faith and it's not his brother anymore. Now it's just becoming more offensive and disrespectful.
Interesting. Go ahead, Bobby.
Well, I would say that the reason I asked if he was an atheist, because sometimes people can have, they can be Jewish in their ethnicity, but they're still atheists. So they would identify as a Jew, but they're an atheist. And that can confuse people sometimes. And that is because you're separating the ethnicity from one's faith and belief. The reason then I got curious about atheism is because it's not uncommon for a certain brand of atheists, namely the new atheists, to ridicule people of faith. So it's an interesting situation, and you have somebody who actually professes to have a belief in Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, which the Jews would ascribe to, yet he's making fun of it. So there's a disconnect. I think this is a situation where there's a lot more questions, and that's not the nature of this program to keep unpacking this too much. Otherwise, I would be really trying to do what Brian did a little bit there, like what's the ridicule, so I could figure out the apologetic stance that I'm going to have. I would say just keep your identity in Jesus. Don't, just remember what it is that you believe. Live out your beliefs. There's always going to be critics. I think about Nehemiah when he was building the walls in that 52 days. Unbelievable. And they had Sanballat and Tobiah, and they were the critics out there just mocking them for what they were trying to do. And not only that, God asks us to do things sometimes that purposely will get us in a spot where we'll get ridiculed. Think about Ezekiel laying on his side for 390 days, then rolling over to the other side and giving God another 40 days, playing with pots and pans and dividing hair up into strands and thirds. It had to just look absurd. He was God's sidewalk prophet. Think about Isaiah either walking naked, the first Berkeley prophet, or walking in his undergarments. There are these things that God asks us to do as believers that just don't make a lot of sense. Even Naaman, when he wanted to get healed, he was told to go dip 7 times in the river, and it seemed absurd to him. So there are these things that God asks us to do, like follow him in a Christian faith that doesn't make sense to the outside world. But as we follow God faithfully, as we live out our character, we can trust that those whom he is leading to the cross, they'll eventually become convicted. And those who are rooted in their blindness, they might remain in their blindedness. But a sub-theme running throughout, and this is the interesting thing. So if he was making fun of some of maybe the things that seem absurd in the Bible, like I'm bringing up, that's one of the themes of the Jewish Bible is the absurdity of go walk around the wall 7 times on the 7th day, walk around once each day, walk to a wall of water and then watch it part. It's God's way of leading. It's like he leads us to do things that seem absurd. And then when we trust him and follow him, he comes through. And then it's in his coming through that it actually validates that he's with us. So he asks us to do things that don't always make sense, that look absurd. And when we follow him in it, then other people can find faith and come through. So I'd say keep following the Lord. Don't let him minimize what you do, but don't play the game. Don't start getting frustrated and angry. Just be secure. It's okay. I mean, who cares if he makes fun? Like what do you have to lose? You have a lot to lose if you start getting threatened, you start getting on the defensive. If he doesn't agree with it, that's okay. Just show how secure you are in your belief. And maybe that would be the approach that I'd say. I'm sorry, it stinks. It's no fun being ridiculed. I'm not like, I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's going to help you to start challenging it if this guy's not a believer.
And I would just add a little bit to that, Lydia. I would just say, I don't think there's anything the matter with confronting him. I mean, this is just rude, I mean, we're talking about adults here. So, you're coming together for family gatherings or what, and he's coming off with some of this rude stuff, snide comments and so forth. I would just say, hey, we're all adults here. We don't appreciate it. Let's not act like kids. Let's be respectful. But then I would even maybe challenge him a little bit. Like, so, well, what do you believe? Because, like you said, they grew up in a Jewish context. They were bar mitzvahed, but that means absolutely nothing. I guarantee the Bible much better, the Old Testament much better than he does. So, but you might ask him, so, well, what do you believe? And did you know Jesus was Jewish? Is that even something you've realized? And did you know that the New Testament claims that Jesus is a fulfillment of what the prophets said? I mean, I would throw some little things out there like that, just to give them something to maybe think about. So,
thanks for your phone call, Lydia, on the Pastor's Perspective program, 888-564-6173. Let's go to Ronnie now. Hello, Ronnie. Welcome to the program. You're on with Brian Broderson and Bobby Conway.
Hi, guys. How you guys doing?
Doing well, thanks.
Oh, so my question is, my dad's a Jehovah's Witness, and in the Bible in 1 Corinthians it says if a woman's head is uncovered, it's shameful. So anytime I ask him to pray, he grabs like a paper towel and puts it on my head, so I have to have my head covered. But so the verses in the New Covenant, so I can't tell him that Jesus fulfilled it in the Old Covenant. But I was like, is it cultural? I don't want to disobey him because you have to listen to your parents unless they tell you to sin. So I was wondering, how can I tell them I don't need it? I'm okay if I have to do it, but just if there's any way I don't have to have a paper towel or a rag on my head, it'd be nice.
I've never heard this question before, that's for sure.
So, I mean, I'm assuming, Ronnie, that as well that Watchtower, Jehovah's Witness, this is not a genuine Christian faith. It's
yes,
of course, okay. Mm-hmm. It is interesting that he's praying for you, though, and that's the one thing he's going for is the paper towel on the head. I do think that the passage in 1 Corinthians, 11, I think, where Paul's addressing that, that is a passage that I think tells us itself that it's cultural. There are some passages that people want to dismiss as cultural, say, well, in those days they thought this, so we don't think that anymore, so then we don't have to do that. And I think that's a slippery slope. You don't want to go down there. But this passage actually tells us it's cultural because it says it refers to the practice as a custom. And a custom is just an adopted practice that doesn't have any, binding power. It's not like a commandment. A commandment is something God says, you're obligated to this. A custom is something that you just do It's a tradition. It's something that's developed, but it's not a binding thing. So you might just point out to him, Dad, this is really a custom, and I think it was more relevant to people then than it is now. And that is the case. It was part of their culture.
More questions coming right up on Pastor's Perspective.
Pastor's Perspective continues in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pastor's Perspective continues with your question to 1-888-564-6173. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
And we're coming to you live from sunny Southern California on this Tuesday afternoon. It's sunny, but it's cold and windy. So cold and windy, we might have to wear Bernie mittens. I don't know. I'm in the studio with Brian Broderson from Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. And joining us on the Bobby Cam, it's author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube. Bobby, is that Bernie I see in the window behind you? Is he sitting in that room? Is he looking in on what's going on? That was a very creative thing that one of our staffers did.
To me.
Yes. Yes.
Who did that?
Somebody here, sitting right outside. I can name names if you want me to.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the Bernie thing was pretty funny. Mm-hmm. There were some good ones. I think the best one I saw was the MMA Bernie one where he was, had the guy pinned on the mat. That was pretty classic.
Yep. Lots of good stuff. People being creative during the COVID pandemic. I guess that's what it is. All right. 888-564-6173 is our phone number. We're going to go to Dan in California. You're on Pastor's Perspective. Dan, hello.
Hello.
What's going on?
So thank you for taking my call. I have a question. We started recently attending a church here in the area where we live because our church is kind of shut down because of our situations out here. But I have some questions because I found out that they were once affiliated with the C3 Church from Australia, which I found some things that I didn't necessarily like.
So what's the C3 Church? It's not a Star Wars church, right? C3PO? It's got nothing to do with...
So, Dan, what was what was your experience so far as you've attended?
So we've been like 4 times, and I have not seen anything that I would say was not biblical. Yeah. Other than the only thing they've done really is more of a topical study. So you get a couple scriptures with life experience, which I'm fine with because from what I've read about the church, their teaching it online is solid, and they haven't done or said anything that was not biblical,
right?
From the pulpit, so to speak.
Yeah.
But then they had a guest speaker that made me.
Whoa, you there? What's going on here?
I'm still not sure about the guest speaker, and I tried to look him up, and he was just a motivational speaker.
Okay.
So
what was his name? Do you remember his name?
Rex Crane.
Rex Crane. Okay. Yeah. So the C3 churches are, as you said, they're from Australia. Are you familiar with Hillsong?
Yes.
Okay. So there's some similarities between them and Hillsong. There's some differences as well. I think the C3 churches would still tend to be a little more charismatic than Hillsong is. Yes. Hillsong was charismatic in the early days, but it's not so much known for its, charismatic emphasis these days. So,
right.
Kind of a similar vein, I would say like a light prosperity doctrine, not a heavy prosperity thing, but, probably emphasizing that, you're going to be a world changer and God wants you to succeed and, get out there and stuff. So, I think they've done some good things. I know some people that have been part of those churches, and but I don't know, guest speakers, and sometimes I know a few churches that, although they have some weird reputations, generally they're okay, but then they bring in a guest speaker and everything goes nuts, because sometimes they don't use a ton of discernment with the guest speaker. So I guess, unless some real big red flag comes up, I wouldn't say that, oh, no, you shouldn't go there.
Well, and that's where I've been, and that's what the wife and I talked about, and our grown adult children that have been going with us. And not that we're even looking to change from our home church. It's just our home church is pretty much shut down right now. So, so we love the worship. Yeah. We love the worship. We love the fact that they lay hands on each other and pray. And
that's good. That's good stuff,
Yeah, exactly. But I've also said that, okay, but if we don't get to a place because I believe like you guys do, right? Line by line, word for word, we need it.
Yeah.
We need God's word in that way. And we just haven't seen that yet from the pulpit.
Yeah.
But that's why I wanted to hear your perspective on the C3 church and what that was all about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Bobby, do you have any thoughts on that, or you got any experience with those guys?
No.
Okay.
What are your thoughts?
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say, should that be the main thing that we look for in a church? Is that they teach line upon line, chapter by chapter, like the Calvary Chapel?
No, I don't. I think that can be misleading. I think that, we want to teach. I think what you should look for in a church is that you take a biblical text and you teach the text, versus you take a topic and then you add a couple of biblical verses to it because, you want it to sound like there's a Bible thing, because you can get imbalanced if you do that.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the other hand, you might take a topic and you might find a bunch of verses that relate to the topic, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. But personally, now, in Calvary Chapel, there's some different approaches. There are those who are very much the chapter by chapter, verse by verse, and comment sometimes on every word and all of that. I don't think that's really the model that Pastor Chuck set up, although some people think it is. What a lot of people don't realize about Pastor Chuck is that he did not teach through the Bible on Sunday mornings ever. He never even taught through a book of the Bible on Sunday mornings. Now, I teach through books of the Bible on Sunday morning. That's what I do. But I teach them in somewhat of a topical fashion because, like Paul's letter to the Corinthians, there's a bunch of topics that he addresses with them. So I'm going to take the topic and I'm going to address it, and I'm going to go through the text. Pastor Chuck, he taught through the Bible, Genesis to Revelation, and that was, for his entire ministry life, that was his Sunday night. That's what he did on Sunday night. What he did on Sunday morning is, let's just say he's going to do Genesis 1 through 3 on Sunday night. So on Sunday morning, what you're going to get, he's going to take a passage from somewhere in Genesis 1 through 3, and he's going to preach a sermon on that passage. He might, let's just say, for example, it might be that, and God created man in his image and in his likeness. He created him. Male and female, he created them. Pastor Chuck might take that verse, and he's going to preach a sermon on the image of God that morning. Mm-hmm. He did that his whole ministry life at Calvary Chapel. He never taught through the Bible on Sunday morning. That is why I say there's a bit of a misnomer out there, like that somehow, unless you're teaching, verse by verse, chapter by chapter through the Bible, you're not doing it the Calvary way. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of diversity within Calvary as far. We believe in biblical exposition. We believe in expositing, bringing out the meaning of the biblical text, and guys do it in different ways.
Yep. All right. Dan, thanks for your phone call today on the Pastor's Perspective program. Let's go up to Idaho, where it's probably super cold. Haley, how's it going up there?
Super cold. I'm actually walking to my bus stop right now, and I have my 3 typical jackets on, so it's very chilly here.
3 jackets.
3 jackets. Wow.
That's cold. I'm complaining about 2 tank tops, and she's wearing 3 jackets. I mean, that's just crazy.
That's what you call...
Enjoy your weather over there, sir.
Yes.
That's what you call you're layered, right? So
yes.
You might have to take one layer off. Yeah.
So what's going on today?
Thank you. Oh, really quickly, before I forget, I wanted to tell you, Mr. Broderson, that I was listening to the episode with you and your wife.
Yes.
And it gave me so much hope that there's a really good, awesome, husband out there for me who loves God and will just let me talk, because I could tell your wife's a talker like me. So it gave me a lot of hope there. Thank you for that.
I'll pass that on to my wife. I tell her all the time that she's a talker.
Yeah, it was just really awesome to see. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
My question today is about spiritual gifts, because the Bible says, that basically when we're born again, we get new spiritual gifts. So I was wondering, are there some differentiators between how we can tell between a spiritual gift and just a skill/ability that we have? Because I'm torn as to whether or not God has revealed my spiritual gift to me, or whether or not it's just part of my personality, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I've often wondered about that too. We read in the New Testament, we read the word talents, and so we interpret that as, talents, like the things that we're talented with. Was that the original meaning way back when? So, Bobby, why don't you take this one at first?
Well, I was a part of a church when I was at Dallas Seminary, and Gene Getz was the pastor. And it was interesting. He actually didn't believe in spiritual gifts today at all. So you would have the sign gifts that a cessationist would say have passed away, like prophecies, tongues, healings. But he went so far as to say there was no spiritual gifts, that there were talents that you had. And that kind of made me uncomfortable, because I thought, my goodness, the Bible's pretty clear when you get into 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and you're moving into 13 and 14, and when you look in some of the different areas of Scripture. I do think that it can be confusing. What is the difference between a talent and a spiritual gift? And I think that maybe the big difference is a talent becomes a spiritual gift when the talent is used for the glory of God. It's a gift that God is using to build the kingdom up. It's a gift that God's using for His glory. It's a gift that you are using for His purposes. I will say, though, that there are some interesting things about spiritual gifts. I do think that while one could have some talents that you get saved and then boom, now it's used for God's purposes, I do think God can give people on the spot a gift. I remember, Haley, for me, I was dating Heather, and I said, I don't know how to explain it. Now, I've never spoken in front of people, and I used to struggle skipping and stuttering with my words. And I remember telling Heather, I said, I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like I'm supposed to preach God's word before I ever even did it. And when I really saw it, it's when I was memorizing Scripture. My first verse was 1 Corinthians 10:13, and I was quoting it out loud in the bathroom. And I saw myself quoting out loud 1 Corinthians 10:13, and I saw myself as a person whom God set apart to preach. And sure enough, I said to my wife, I said, when we were dating, I said, can I just try this out on you? Can I just start teaching? And I just started talking. And I was so burdened when I went off to Bible college to preach. It was such a burden inside of me. We lived on 40 acres. We paid $200 a month. We were renting property from a deacon. And there was cows out there, and I'd literally go out and preach to the cows. I just felt so full of God's word that I had to preach. My wife would be cooking dinner and looking out the window, and there her husband would be preaching to the cows. And I know it just seems absurd, but it was so there. And I started walking around, like going to nursing homes and stuff and asking if I could preach, going out to the campuses and preaching. So all that to say, it was really cool. Like I can remember the first time I preached in a church and I was shaking like a leaf, so nervous, but something would just come over me. And so for me, I look at it and I go, it wasn't a talent. In fact, it almost felt, a bit mystical. Like God showed me that he gave it to me before I ever even used it. And I just stepped out in faith and followed him. So I don't know if there's a one size fits all way for this. That's just my story. And I look at it and go, this is clearly a gift that he gave to me. But I could see how some people, they always sang, then they get saved and now they sing for God's purposes. Yep. Ryan, what would you add to that?
Well, I'm trying to remember on your resume where the preaching to the cows part was. I don't remember reading that.
And would we have hired him?
That might have made a difference.
You were going to give me a hard time on that.
That's great. I've heard
might
stories.
Have made a difference.
Yeah, I've heard stories about some of the great preachers that have preached to animals and stuff to get need an audience. So, but Bobby, that's a great story. I love it because it's true. It's true. I mean, I was not by any means any kind of a person who felt like I could speak publicly or nothing like that at all. I still don't feel like I could speak publicly, but back then it was even worse. But like you, I had the same thing. I had just a burning in me and a passion that I just knew I needed to do this. I asked Cheryl if I could do that, like you did with Heather. She said, "No, sit down, shut up, I'll preach." And so, I'm just kidding. But
that's great.
But so going back to Haley's question, and let me just clarify this, Haley. When the Bible speaks about a talent, that is not a talent like we use the term today. In the Gospels where Jesus says, he gave talents, that's a measurement. It's a weight measurement, like a talent of gold or something like that. So the Bible doesn't speak about it doesn't use the word talent like we use it. We would call these things like natural giftings, but you have to think about this. There really is no natural gifting because God created all of us. So he created some of us with certain things within our DNA, that like my grandson, my 11-year-old grandson, I mean, it's amazing. His artistic ability is amazing. And I just look at him and I think, he draws stuff and I'm like, wait, you drew that? How did you do that? Now, I couldn't draw that now. I just never had that in me. But, so God gives those kinds of things. But I think what you said, Bobby, is super great about sometimes it's taking something that God's already instilled in us that seems like a natural thing and enhancing it and taking it to another level.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just giving something to a person who did not previously possess this, but now this is God's gift to me. That's the beauty about it, right? I mean, anybody. I mean, think of Moses. Moses was not, by his own admission, he says, "I'm not your guy. I can't speak. I'm not good. I'm not articulate. I stutter." Moses is trying to get out of it, and God says, "Look," I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, "I made your mouth, so I'm gonna. It'll be okay. I can help you speak. I made the mouth, so we'll figure it out." And so, how's that, Haley?
I thought that was great, and I really appreciate it. If I can just ask like a super quick secondary question. If I feel like God told me to do something and I've been praying about it for a while and it keeps getting confirmed, even though I feel like alone. Like it's like just this wild, crazy idea that it's like, whoa, God, you think I could do that? Like, do you think that there's a place for women in the church to like share their testimony and like preach, or is that something that like just mostly like men do in the church?
Well, that will depend on the church you're in. There's differences of opinion on that, So we at our church, I believe that women can preach and are gifted to preach. And you heard my wife, like you said on the radio the other day. She's really a good preacher and a good Bible teacher. So I will give her opportunities. As a matter of fact, last Sunday, her and I. We do 2 services on Sunday. So first service, it was just her and I sitting down together talking about prayer. And, she had some amazing things to say. And it was actually her outline that sort of launched us into what we did. Our son joined us the second service because he had some things that he thought he wanted to contribute. And it went well. So, hopefully you would be in a church where they would encourage your gifts and give an outlet for them, give an opportunity for you to use those gifts.
Yep. Thanks for your phone call today, Haley, on the Pastor's Perspective program. By the way, Friday's program with Brian and Cheryl is available on Facebook and YouTube and Spotify. Our archives, just look for the one from January 22nd, 2021. And over at cccm.com, Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa's website, you can find yesterday's Sunday's message. Today's Tuesday. So the message from a couple of days ago, January 24th, you'll find that up there.
Yeah, it should be. I'm not sure if it's up yet, but it should.
It should be. You're right. It may not be. Okay. Shantae, we'll go to you next. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective. Shantae, you there?
Oh, yeah. Hi, I'm here. How are you?
Doing well. What did you want to know?
Wow.
You had a Freemason question.
Freemason Illuminati questions. I have questions. How is it that people that are so-called distributing the Word of God in such it's not a secret anymore, but how is that part of the devil? I know it's part of the devil, but how is it that they can be in the position to do that and do the other at the same time?
So how can a Freemason be the leader of a church? Is that what you're asking, Shantae?
Freemason and Illuminati. I'm not leaving out either or.
Okay. Bobby, we'll start with you on that one.
Well, Shantae, I appreciate that question. It was really interesting. When I left California and I went off to Conway, Arkansas to Bible college, I remember here I took this class on the cults, and I was learning about Freemasonry. And then I started learning that one of the professors and the president at the time were a part of the Freemason group. And I thought, this is unbelievable. Like as a professor, he seemed very conservative, very to the, line on the word. And I thought, this is so confusing. This makes absolutely no sense how you're a part of a Freemasonry movement. And this is happening. And I think I would agree with you. This is a real problem. And I think there are things sometimes that as Christians, I don't know if it's someone's upbringing or it's part of their culture, and they just find a way of getting okay with it. So let me give you an example of maybe where I could get criticized. I have been a part of many, many, many Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And when you go to those meetings, you're praying at the end together, our Father, Lord in heaven, hallowed be thy name. But many of these people aren't really praying to the God that I would believe to be Yahweh, right? The Trinity. And so I think that you have to kind of wrestle through how is it that you could be in it. I don't think you can make room for it with the Freemasonry. It's really problematic to me. When I think about the secrecy, some of the different gestures, some of the behind the scenes stuff that takes place in AA, I would say what helps me to cope with that a little bit is I could see how you could be a Christian and you're going there and you're just hoping to really help people to come to know who the true higher power is. So it's not like a secret that people believe in these different things in AA. Where in Freemasonry, this is a lot of secrecy stuff. And I think for a Christian to be like in an AA, they could be going, you know what? Hey, I just need to be around other alcoholics and addicts to get my story that help me to be sober. But I realize that if I get the opportunity to talk about who I believe the higher power is, I'm going to use that as an evangelistic op. And I think that so it's not about the secrecy in that way. That's just something that I would say that I would have a hard time being in a church if a pastor was, also connected to the Freemasonry movement. Now, I know Pastor Brian is a Freemason, so how do you live as... No, I'm just kidding.
See why we're always in trouble? I mean, come on.
It's all Bobby's fault.
What was that? What was the other thing that Shante said, though? Not only Freemason, what was the other thing?
The Illuminati.
The Illuminati, yes. Well, the Illuminati is an imaginary society. It doesn't really exist. So you do not want to...
But that's what the Illuminati would want you to believe.
Yes, well, you don't want to get caught up in any Illuminati stuff, because it seriously is. It's a conspiracy theory that's just been around forever and ever. A lot of people don't know this, but back in the day, Pastor Chuck, there was a rumor that Chuck had been financed by the Illuminati. They gave him money to start Maranatha Music so he could destroy the church by bringing in rock and roll.
Oh, really?
That's where all that began, but that's another one of those Illuminati stories. So,
man.
Bobby, the thing with the Freemasons that I sometimes wonder, I just wonder, I know some of them are really into, all of the varying levels and, really getting into all the secret society stuff. But some of them, I wonder, is it just like the Elks Club? Is it just a place where you go to hang out with people and, meet, make business connections and stuff like that? So I don't know. An interesting historical fact, though, is that many of the founding fathers of the United States of America were Freemasons.
That's right.
And they were deeply involved in their Freemasonry. George Washington was a Freemason, and several of the other ones were. So, it's been around a long time. And when you start looking at the doctrine, if you will, or the actual spiritual beliefs and things, it's a false religion. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, and so as a pastor, I think that you've just got to be aware and be a little bit more discerning.
Yeah.
And I would agree. I mean, there's people on a real low surface level. They don't realize maybe what they're into.
Yeah, right.
But if you're going to be a pastor, you need to understand some of the depths. So that's where I was confused at my Bible college going, this guy's a professor and he's in the Masonic Lodge.
Yeah.
Is this legit? Or was this just a rumor? Because it didn't make sense.
Yeah, right.
Now I'm watching Bobby on the video right now, and he's using a lot of hand movements. I wonder if he's throwing hand gestures out
It just
there.
reminded me of yoga. And if you want to know anything about yoga, just watch the Charles Barkley interview with Ellen. He says it's just stretching. Mm-hmm. It's just stretching.
That's what he says.
That they charge you $100 for. It's just stretching. And kale is just lettuce.
Yes. Oh, kale. That's a whole different story. Okay, that's all the time we have on today's program. So many good calls that we couldn't get to. Please call us tomorrow. We'll open up the lines about 7 minutes before 3 o'clock Pacific time. Have a great evening. God bless you guys.
Thanks for listening to Pastor's Perspective. We trust you've been blessed and had your question answered. Join us Monday through Friday and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/pastorsperspective. The preceding was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, California.